record on this computer. Oh. All right, well, welcome, Brewer fans, to the Brew Crew Review Podcast. We are well into the offseason at this point, into February, and the Brewers are finally making some significant moves. Join me once again is Vince Travato. Vince, how's it going?
I'm well, Craig. How are you? Do we have Scott or Chad on here today?
I don't believe that we do, but they're more than they're invited, and we'll see if they can maybe chime in with their expert analysis. But otherwise, we're gonna have to take it from here. Okay. So all right. I guess Brewer fans have been waiting patiently all offseason to make some significant move, other than, of course, signing utility infielder Daniel Robertson.
Just sorry, it just sounds funny when you recap our off season. I didn't mean to laugh.
Signing Jace Peterson, I believe. But besides that, the Brewers then this week did finally make a pretty significant signing, and that player is from our former rival St. Louis Cardinals, and we signed second baseman Colton Wong to a 2-year, $18 million contract with, I believe, a club option for a third year. And that was not, I don't think, a move any Brewer fan or fan of Major League Baseball or anyone on the planet was expecting. But before I start on my rant, I'd like for you to give your analysis of your initial thoughts and your reaction to this, I guess, big offseason signing from the Milwaukee Brewers. Colton Wong is now a Milwaukee Brewer.
Yeah, thanks, Craig. It did surprise me, as well as I think, like as you pointed out, most Brewer fans to hear that news this morning. I had not seen the Brewers attached to Colton Wong's name whatsoever at all this offseason, or even in prior seasons, anything like that. So, Wong had essentially become a free agent after he turned down his part of an option year with the Cardinals for over $12 million earlier in the offseason. So I think that it surprised a lot of people just because the Brewers were not necessarily looking, at least certainly not publicly, for a second baseman, given the fact that we've got a very young, cost-controlled Keston Hiura at the position. So it certainly did contain that element of surprise. I'd say that overall, if this is the only move that the Brewers make, then it's a huge disappointment. If this is something that is part of a larger strategy that Matt Arnold and David Stearns are putting together, I could be okay with it. I think that, again, the dollar amounts averages out to $9 million a year for the next 2 years, so it is less than the option he turned down annually. So maybe it's about on par with what he would get from another club. I think that maybe the 2 years is why the Brewers were able to sign him. So from that perspective, I'm not too upset about the dollar amount unless it really does limit us, but I tend to think that it won't if there is another move to be made. I'm guessing that we still have the payroll capacity to do that. As far as Wong as a ball player, he's been a thorn in the Brewers side. I will certainly say that. I think he's got a 308 lifetime batting average at Miller Park, so it'll be nice not to have to face him again, I guess, if you're the Brewers. But I think that he's a little bit better than average, sort of a replacement level offensive player. I do like the fact that he gets on base quite a bit. I think where he really does add a ton of value is on his defense. He's certainly going to be better defensively than Hiura at second base. But for me, until I really don't know how to rate this transaction until we see what the Brewers' overall plan is. If this is a move of Keston Hiura to first base, and that is Keston's our new first baseman, I guess that's one way to fill a need. But I'm not convinced that the Brewers are done yet. I still think that I'm hoping that we're not done yet, that we're going to still hopefully bring in an actual third baseman as well with some power, because that's one thing that Colton Wong certainly lacks is power. So, for those reasons, I'm not going to give the trade a grade yet. I'm not overly disappointed. I think that, judging from our pre-production meetings, I think I know where you're going to come down on this one. I'm kind of in a wait and see approach. I don't completely dislike Colton Wong as a ball player. So it's not just a loss automatically either, but it's a wait and see before I declare it a win as a signing as well.
Yeah, that's some good analysis, Vince, and I agree with a lot of your points. I will start by saying I do think this was the wrong move for the Brewers. But I mean, no one saw this coming because my initial reaction was because it's been kind of Sturm's MO for the last couple of seasons. Last year we had not so many outfielders we didn't know what to do with, and then he went and signed Avisal Garcia to a 2-year contract and overpaid him for some reason. Similarly, this move, I mean, we literally have a whole roster full of people that can play second base already. Keston Hiura, we've got Luis Urias, who was our big offseason trade acquisition last year. We just signed Robertson. He can play second base. And so I don't get that. With that being said, I mean, looking at the Brewers team that did make the playoffs with a third consecutive team last year, an expanded playoff year, their offense was just god awful. And I don't believe that this was exactly what I was envisioning as a fix for that. And so basically signing someone that doesn't fix our offense and is a position we don't need doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. So it's trying to wrap my head around Stearns and Arnold's thinking here as far as making this signing. And I also think that they slightly overpaid for him and anyway, on top of it. So it's a little bit of a shocking reaction, I guess, overall. I will say in a vacuum, Colton Wong is a good player, in my opinion, but nothing more than average. I will say that he's got great second baseman defense, which is the exact opposite of Hira. And so he'll improve our club in that way. He does know how has the ability to get on base. He does hit left-handed and can hit toward the top of the lineup, possibly even leadoff spot. So those type of players are valuable in a vacuum. Obviously, we're going to fit him as a starting player somewhere on our roster, and assuming at second base. So what that means is, it again creates a whole bunch of other questions, just like last year when we signed Garcia. Like, where's Braun going to play? Oh, we'll stick him at first. Well, here we are exactly a year later, and we moved our former franchise player, Ryan Braun, just took away his starting job with that signing last year for no reason and said, go play first base. Now we're doing the same exact thing a year later to our future franchise player in Keston Hiura, who's still very young and capable, I believe, to at least give second base a little bit more of a shot. And now we're moving him off second base. Where are we going to play him, one might ask? Well, I think the only option is first base. I mean, we may have thought, we could DH him. I'm also against DHing a player as young as Hiura this early in his career also. So really, I guess what, Keston Hiura, you're going to have to learn how to play first base this year, and hoping that he's able to do that. We have to have his bat in the lineup. We can ill afford
unless I'm sorry, Craig, keep going. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, unless we're trying to trade Keston, I mean, that's the only other thing I could think of is Keston potentially on the move. I mean, it'd be shocking again if the Brewers were to trade a young player like Keston with his pedigree, a former first round pick by the Brewers, a guy who, certainly, I guess he did have a down year in 2020, like many other players did, but certainly showed in 2019 that he could hit in the big leagues, and his bat has always been, a huge part of his game. I don't know. I think that bears worth thinking about, though, too, because it really does remain to be seen if Keston Hiura has ever even played a game at Little League at first base. I mean, I don't think he played. We could have the interns look this up, but I don't think he played one game in the minor leagues at first base, and I don't know that he played any in college. And it's just he's going to have to learn a new position at a young age in the big leagues and still be expected, if he is with the Brewers, to bear a big brunt of our offensive attack because we lack other options. So, it would be a professional challenge, no question about it. I could see it, I could see David Stearns and Matt Arnold trying it, though. I mean, they certainly are willing to think outside the box. I will give them that because they seem to try to address positions of need by acquiring guys to play positions that we already have a strength in. So maybe this is just the new plan, and guys are expected to be able to play multiple positions across the board, even your bigger offensive players or stars like Keston Hiura or Ryan Braun.
Yeah, and now Colton Wong does not have that same profile where he can play all over the diamond. I mean, he's never even played one game at the major league level at third base. So there's some thought, oh, we're gonna play him at third. No, that it's unquestionable that he's gonna be our second baseman, starting second baseman,
Right.
and every baseman.
Well, and that's his value too. His value as a great defensive second baseman. I mean, no question about it. His glove is great. I do think he's one of the better defensive second basemen in baseball. And with Lorenzo Cain, assumingly coming back to play center field, that's a really great up the middle defense between Wong and Cain. So, I don't think you want to take away that strength of this trade by moving him. He did play a few games in the outfield last year, though, too, just for the record. But I really do think his value comes in being a great defensive second baseman.
Yeah, and that's a good point. He could be a backup outfielder, including even he's got some center field experience, which is valuable. So again, harking the point that Stearns and Arnold, they definitely value those up the middle types, center fielders, shortstops, second baseman. And that's all well and good and very important defensively. I get that. But when you're completely ignoring offensive production from the corners, that's a little bit concerning. I thought that lesson would have been learned last year. So I'm a little bit miffed right now on what exactly, the plan is in the corners, and maybe that's forthcoming. At this point, if the season were to start after this move, obviously Luis Urias would be our starting third baseman. And, he does have the ability to play shortstop and kind of is pegged as our future shortstop, but we did re-sign Orlando Arcia too. So, I mean, I think there's a possibility that Arcia could be, a bench shortstop or backup shortstop if indeed we sign a really quality, let's say Justin Turner type third baseman. But I don't really feel that that's going to happen. I feel that the third will probably sign a third baseman to platoon or something or be a backup or emergency depth for Urias. So it'll be interesting. But with that being said, I just don't think that this lineup has enough thump power-wise than it needs. But again, we're focusing on our great starting pitching and bullpen to hold the opposition down to runs. And if we can manufacture enough runs, that's all well and good. And we obviously were able to make playoffs last year. With that being said, I really just think this team would be improved with that one solid third base bat now. I mean, knowing that we're not going to be signing a first base bat, like we attempted to sign Justin Smoke last year, hoping that his, bat at first base would be a middle order type, and it just failed. So I guess we're not taking that route again. So instead we're signing athletic up the middle types once again. So it may work.
Yeah.
I don't absolutely hate it. I just am a little bit confused by it. And, nothing against Colton Wong, but he is already 30 years old, and I think he's past his prime. And I prefer not to sign guys like that. The difference between this signing and Avisal Garcia one last year, which is a very similar contract. I believe his was a two-year, $18 million with a third-year club option. Also, it's almost exact same contract that Colton Wong just signed. And the difference is that I think Avisal Garcia was only 26 years old during the signing last year. Colton Wong's 4 years older, so I'm a little bit concerned that we're not going to get that same production that we've had from him during his Cardinals career here, but I hope so, certainly. The other thing, it's almost like Stearns and Arnold are planning like a year in advance. That's kind of what I thought when they did the Garcia. They knew they were going to have a corner outfield hole coming 2021 season, so they filled it a year early and just figured out where he was going to play. And then same thing with Wong here. Obviously, it's almost going to be certain if there's a 2022 season that the NL will have the DH in the new CBA most likely. So at that point, Keston Hiura could play DH if necessary, obviously, and we would need a second base opening, and therefore, Colton Wong would be valuable for us starting in 2022. And I guess this is a fallback option. They might be able to see if Hiura can play first base this year, and if he can't, then in 2022, DH would be an option. I hope not, but it seems like that's kind of the plan again. I just don't know if I agree with this plugging holes a year in advance type of thing by creating a log jam during the current year. But that seems like the second year in a row that we're doing this. And not that the Avisar Garcia signing blew up in our face, but I think that was an overpriced contract for the type of player he is, and and I kind of feel the same way about this Colton Wong one. I guess overall, but
Craig, to one of your points, I don't worry as much about Wong's age at this point, given that it's a 2-year deal. If this were a 5-year deal, I'd be a little bit more concerned. I mean, certainly I think that was a valid question when Lorenzo Cain was signed to a 5-year deal as opposed to a 3 or 4-year deal. And but for these 2-year deals, I don't worry about it a ton. I mean, you're only on the hook for so long. I don't think that he's going to just lose all of his skills by the age of 32. So, if this were a signing that was done, when he was 36, maybe we can start talking about that.
No, I agree with that. I just saying they're not going to be at their peak because, in my opinion, and history has shown that offensive players' peak seasons are age 27 through 30 seasons, almost hands down all the time. So he's just out of his prime, and therefore you can expect, I would think, a slight decline in numbers. However, he will be moving to a more hitter-friendly park at Miller Park, so perhaps it'll be about the same. So he is a lefty bat. He can hit leadoff, and it wouldn't surprise me if he is given that leadoff role over Cain, and possibly have the top of the lineup of Wong, lefty, Cain, who's a righty in the 2-hole, and then followed by Yelich as a lefty in the 3-hole instead of his traditional 2-hole, and then maybe Hira hitting cleanup. So that's a pretty formidable top 4 lefty righty top of the lineup. After that, it gets pretty dicey in our lineup as it currently stands. So we're hoping some more signings are on the way. Also, you would expect the Brewers to at least 1 or 2 veteran starting pitchers along the way here too, because as it stands now, it seems like anyone past Wood, Ruff, and Burns in our rotation are huge question marks in my opinion. And not only that, but Woodruff and Burns are still young enough and unproven enough that they're not solidly entrenched in their roles either, even though it is good to see that we have 2 top of the rotation type guys under team control and for fairly cheap in those 2. But again, I really think that we need a veteran pitcher outside of Josh Lindblom, possibly as a signing. So we'll see. I do think we have a great bullpen, and
there was some talk of Rich Hill today, right? Didn't that pop up on the rumors that were going around today?
That may be true. Yeah, obviously he qualifies, but he's a little bit older a veteran than he's already 40 years old, but he does, have a good track record.
Craig, think of it like this when you're talking about these guys' age. When looking at a guy like Colton Wong. Colton was 16 during our spring break in Puerto Penasco, Mexico, in 2006. So
that's true.
Just wanted to point that out. Yeah. So let's, I'm just hitting my prime right now, so I feel like we're still okay on the age stuff.
No, you're exactly right.
I do find my favorite part of today's. Oh yeah, for sure. My favorite part of today's signing was actually that our colleague Tom Hodgecourt, just in the paper on Sunday, that of course we were blocked from reading, had said that the Brewers were done making moves already this offseason, that there would be no other signings taking place. So I just wanted to point that out.
Wow, that's great inside information from our journal beat writer for the Milwaukee Brewers. Wow, that's terrible. Of course.
Just thought that was worth mentioning here on this podcast. Hopefully he's listening. And speaking of Tom's, did you get any indicator that the Brewers are still in on somebody like a Justin Turner to address our third base needs, or are we looking to trade for a third baseman like Jose Ramirez of the Indians? Did our anonymous source Tom Carter mention anything to you about that? I talked to our anonymous source earlier, but he didn't mention anything specifically other than saying "stay tuned." I think is his quote to me.
He said just you can call him T. Carter instead of saying his first name. So that we'll try to do that about Tom. But yeah, well, a couple of things. He said that even though this move today, the Brewers had no plan to trade in Keston Hiura, which may be speculated. So that's one piece of information that I know is pretty solid from TC. Secondly, he does think that we're still going to sign a third baseman to, at the very minimum, be a platoon partner for Luis Urias, and he expects that player to have some form of power in his game. So I don't know. He didn't throw out any particular names, but we'll see. There are some
Jake Lamb.
guys thought Jake Lamb would be a good one. Definitely, he's one of my favorites. So that's most likely not going to happen. But maybe a name like Maikel Franco, formerly of the Phillies and Royals, as an option also. So we'll see. But those are a couple names to watch. But I don't. Besides doing that move and maybe signing one or two starting pitchers, I don't expect any other big moves. So unfortunately, if this is really our biggest move of the offseason, Colton Wong signing. Again, it'll be slightly as exciting as last year's big move of getting Avisel Garcia, which is, again, not moving the needle of excitement very much. So I know that we don't have a ton of time in this podcast, but I do want to address the elephant in the room, and the elephant's name is Nolan Arenado, who unfortunately one of the best players in baseball, best hitters, and best defensive third baseman probably in the game, got traded to the St. Louis Cardinals from the Colorado Rockies for basically just a bunch of garbage prospects. And just to make it worse, the Rockies kicked in $50 million to make it happen as well. So the Cardinals got a huge steal, and now, they, with Arenado at third and Paul Goldschmidt at first, they have a formidable lineup, and defensively they're amazing as well. So unfortunately, I think that's a slightly better move than the Colton Wong signing, I would say, by just a tad. And so even though the Brewers finished behind the Cardinals last year in the division, I don't like what this is doing to separate the Cardinals from us. But I will say that the couple of Cubs moves, including signing Jock Peterson and signing starting pitcher Trevor Williams, is a little less exciting and don't scare me at all. So I do feel that we're still at least equally as good as the Cubs, especially with them losing Yu Darvish this offseason. So I don't know. And the Reds obviously are losing some pretty key pieces with Trevor Bauer, definitely not re-signing with them. And I feel that they trade away their closer as well. So and they lost their shortstop. So I really think that the Brewers are still a second best team in NL Central going into the offseason. Into the season at this point, where we're still a couple weeks off of here, spring training kind of getting kicked off. So that's exciting, at least.
Well, and Craig, that leads to the other big bit of news just this past week since our last podcast. The owners had sent a proposal to the Major League Baseball Players Association that had talked about pushing back the start of spring training, pushing back the start of the regular season for about a month, expanding the playoffs and including the DH, and shrinking the overall number of games played in the regular season from 162 to 154. That offer was rejected by the players, and not to get into who was right or wrong on that, but I do think it's worth pointing out that at this point in time, as we sit and tape this on February 3rd, the spring training is scheduled to be starting on time, and Major League Baseball's regular season also scheduled to be starting on time. No announcements yet regarding fans in the stands around baseball, and maybe that's going to be city specific in a lot of cases, but with the pandemic. But I do think it's worth discussing that and at least throwing that out there for discussion. Just Major League Baseball looking forward to starting on time this year, unlike in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very exciting. Knowing that there'll be a full season and just, the spring training starting on time, that's big. It would have been very disappointing to me if everything got pushed back a month. And I understand the offer from the owners or whatnot, trying to use a pandemic as an excuse to try to, save a little money. That's fine. But I really think that make a little bit more money with expanded playoffs. It'll be interesting that this will definitely be the last year in a long time where there's only going to be 10 total teams making the playoffs. So I really think in the next CBA, it's almost a foregone conclusion that they're going to probably expand to 14 teams in the playoffs starting in 2022. My belief. Obviously, last year they did 16, luckily, or else the Brewers wouldn't have snuck in. But I think that's just too many, and I think they realize that too. So it'll be interesting. It'll be very much more difficult to make the playoffs this year. And so I'm still looking forward to a great Milwaukee Brewers season, but my expectations are not that they're going to for sure make the playoffs as they have 3 years in a row. But
no, I agree. And we can get into our season preview, I think in a few weeks down the road during spring training. But, at this point, honestly, I'm just very excited as a fan that there's at least some light, hopefully, at the end of the tunnel with these vaccines, that we could, in theory, as fans, be in the stands for actual Major League Baseball games here in 2021. It's just cannot believe we went a full season without it. But at this point, that's going to be a win as far as I'm concerned. And secondary to that is going to be the team on the field, to be quite frank, for 2021 on a personal note.
Absolutely. I know Brewer fans are missing the stadium, and even though it's called the American Family Fields or whatever, there's still the great parking lot that they're missing out on too. So I'm sure they're chomping at the bit to get back.
That's true.
So I guess before we wrap it up, are there any players out there that you would want the Brewers, that are still free agents, that you would want the Brewers to target, starting pitching or third base types that you kind of?
Yeah, there's a couple guys in mind. I mean, obviously, like many Brewer fans, I'd love for the Brewers to sign Justin Turner to a 1 or even a 2-year deal. If it was a 1-year deal, I would throw the annual value up considerably, and I do think he's going to end up, unfortunately, getting maybe a 3-year deal to go back to the Dodgers or something. But in theory, I would love to do that. Barring that from happening, I think that there are a number of what I'll call lesser third basemen on the market. If we aren't satisfied with that, though, I could see us using some of the limited prospect capital that we do have, and trying to swing a deal for a guy like Jose Ramirez. I think he'd be a better long-term fit at third base, and allow us to have a lot of flexibility. We could include one of our other infielders in the trade, but I don't know that we're really going to match up well with the Indians. They may be asking for a lot more for a guy like Ramirez than we're capable of giving, but I'd say that those two guys, or one of those two guys, would be the top of my personal wish list. I do think that our pitching staff is pretty good, actually, in the top, we'll say 3 spots. I do think that Freddie Peralta is going to be a starter this year. I certainly hope so, which to me solidifies spots 1 through 4 essentially in that starting rotation. I wouldn't mind adding another veteran arm just to throw into the mix. There's still a number of guys out there. I don't really have anybody specifically in mind for that role, but certainly would never hurt to add a guy like that. And I would, for nostalgia's sake, but also because I think he can still be valuable on the field, I would love to see the Brewers bring back Ryan Braun on a 1-year deal and be a bench bat. I don't know if he's willing to do that at this stage in his career, but I think it would be great to see him back in a Brewers uniform in 2021. Hopefully allow the fans to say goodbye to a guy who has been a part of 5 Brewers playoff teams at this point in his career, and who's won an MVP in Milwaukee and meant a lot for baseball in Milwaukee, and has spent his entire career in a Brewers uniform. I think that'd be very fitting. So those 3 things would be on my wish list.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, and I agree with it. It would be cool to bring Ryan Braun back just to finish out his career here. I just don't know if that's going to happen. I hope so, but I just wish we would offer a contract to Daniel Vogelbach back at this point, because of the fact that there's no DH, and now we've got Hero playing first. There's really no starting position for Vogelbach, and he definitely doesn't have the profile to be like a bench bat. Just because of his lack of defensive help, period, anywhere. So he's not the type of, I don't know, but we're probably stuck with him unless we can cut him or something. But if I would have rather brought back Ryan Braun, obviously it costs a little bit more, but than Vogelbach. But I guess hindsight 2020 for the Brewers organization. But as far as the other parts of the team go, of course, my wish list at third base, I probably shouldn't even say because I know what's not going to happen. But I love that, bring in Jake Lamb and have him compete for at least platoon at bats at third base with Urias, and with a right-handed hitter, Lamb the lefty. I think that would work out really good. And not only that, but if the Keston Hiura experiment completely fails at first base, Jake Lamb has first base experience as well. So I think that's kind of an ideal fit. And I think that gives him an advantage over someone like Mikael Franco, who I mentioned, who is right-handed hitting third baseman. I don't think he can platoon with Urias, obviously being right-handed, but he does offer some nice power, and he still has some youth on his side. I wouldn't be saddened by that signing. But as far as the pitching staff goes, there's still some nice starting pitching names out there on the market. We're obviously not going to get a top guy, but as far as like maybe a younger guy, a reclamation project, maybe someone like a Taijuan Walker or even Julio Teheran, maybe he's got something left in the tank. Or if you're looking more for veterans, like you said, I wouldn't mind still. And also, I know Brewer fans won't like to hear this, but I wouldn't be, against giving Cole Hamels like a 1-year contract at like $4 million or something like that, and see if he's got anything left in his tank either. But we'll see.
Yeah.
There'll probably be none of those guys I mentioned, so don't expect anything.
I wasn't trying to be personally harsh towards you in our pre-production meeting, but I do think it's funny because like literally every guy that you don't want the Brewers to sign, we end up signing, and it is kind of humorous, you have to admit. But I like Walker a lot. I would not be opposed to bringing in a guy like Walker for the back end of our rotation. I think he'd be a really good bet that he's still got some upside and could still develop, and if he can get past some injuries, I think that he could be a really good, valuable, lower cost addition. But we'll see. I'm hopeful that we're not done. I guess that's my biggest hope. I know that fans have been clamoring for several months now at this point to make any move, just do something, because everyone can see that our offense was fairly putrid, even though we did make the playoffs last year. So I hope that the Brewers don't just do this, think that they're done, and then move on. I know that we're going to get Kane back. I know that Yelich is probably not going to hit 209 or whatever this year. I know that Hira is probably going to have a better offensive season than he did last year, but we still need to look at ways to improve our offense. And I hate to lose the power at the hot corner that if we're going to throw out, Urias is our starting third baseman. I think he's a very valuable player, but I think he's more valuable in another role on our team, not necessarily as a starting third baseman.
I agree. I think his bat would play much better as a starting shortstop. And I don't think, even though Orlando Arcia had a nice year last year with the bat, hitting 260, I believe, I don't think he necessarily is guaranteed a shortstop job, even though he's great defensively. I think that this will probably be our last year with him. So I really expect there to be at least some at bats, at the major league level for Urias, no matter what happens with our next signings, because I do think he's a key part of our future middle infield, so to speak. And so, yeah, it'll be exciting, definitely, coming up. The Brewers, I don't agree with hardcore. They're definitely not done. I think there's going to be a couple more key signings, and maybe there'll be someone, bargain that can be, open up the purse strings a little bit more for, kind of like we've been prone to do the last couple of seasons. And I'm not expecting that, but you never know, and I think the Brewers will be a very competitive team this year. And I like that you mentioned, I still Freddie Peralta is kind of the big X factor in the pitching staff overall. Whether or not he gets to be a starter again, I think he could really take off. And if that doesn't happen, I think he could be a key back of the bullpen type guy too. And I'm really excited about our bullpen. I mean, I don't think there's another bullpen in baseball that's as good as ours, with Hader and Williams alone at the back end of it. I mean, and some other electric as well.
And I agree. I think that my hope with Peralta is that we just stick to one thing with him. I think that can really hinder, and he's still a young guy. I think it can really hinder a young guy's development to just be thrown into all sorts of different roles. I know that it's done. I know that he's been able to adapt fairly well, but I really wish that we would give him a full season to show what he could do as a starter, or just decide he's going to be a reliever and stick to it, except for maybe an emergency start or something. And my hope is that it's in the starting rotation. I think he's got the stuff. I think he can last. I think he can go deeper into games than we give him credit for. I think he's a guy who does tend to get hit harder in the first inning or the first go through a lineup, so he's going to have to work on that. But I still think that Peralta is a guy that could really be a valuable live arm, in our starting rotation. So I'm hopeful that we put him in the rotation to start the year, and then we keep him there, and let it play out and see what happens.
Yeah, ideally, this is how I'd like to give Freddie Peralta that number 3 starting spot or whatever, and then the number 4 rotation spot, I would like to have a veteran signing there at that spot. And then number 5, I'd kind of like to see what we still have in Eric Lauer, with Josh Lindblom kind of acting as a swing man, so to speak. And I would put Adrian Hauser back in the bullpen permanently, even if it's in a longer role.
Yeah, I could see that. I'm probably a little higher on Hauser than you are, just from our previous shows, but it doesn't have to be as a starter. I just think he's got decent stuff, and we shouldn't just toss him away. I think that he's got some value, whether that's as a number 5 starter or if it's in the bullpen, I'm not really too hung up on it when you've got other options. I was very disappointed in Lindblom last year. I don't know if it was just a product of it being a weird season, and you kind of throw out a lot of parts of a weird season, or if it was a readjustment period for him after the Korean League, or if he's just not as talented as the Brewers had hoped. And I think that kind of remains to be seen, but it'll be really telling what happens with him in the first, say month of the year here in 2021 and kind of see where things are at. But, out of all those options, I think that you've got at least a decent number 5 starter in that mix. So I think it'll be okay there, but I agree. I'd like to fill in that rotation with one more guy as our, 4 starter or whoever that veteran arm is, to just throw him in that rotation, and not as concerned about the order as I am in making sure that, again, guys like Peralta are either starters or relievers, and making sure that, Corbin Burns stays at the level that he was at last year, and that Woodruff continues to improve, because both of those guys were so clutch for us last year. We're going to obviously be relying on them quite a bit.
Yeah, and the Brewers will probably try to go for one of the, this year's version of Wade Miley or
Jordan Lyles.
Jordan Lyles, where it's just like a journeyman that never succeeded with another team really, but then takes off with us. And my candidate for that would be Tyler Anderson, formerly of the Rockies and the Giants. He's a left-hander who's still only about 30 years old, and I think he would maybe be it. But now that I mentioned him, I'm sure it won't happen. But anyway,
you just jinxed it. Craig Brett Anderson is still out there, as is Wade Miley, and I think Jordan Lyles is out there still too. So you just never know.
Oh yeah, well, let's bring them all back. All right. Speaking of bringing back, we definitely want to bring back to our listeners Scott Bartel and even Chad Collins for that matter at some point. But we want Scotty back as soon as possible. I know he's working for the government and they're keeping him pretty busy, and he's got puppy duties and all that stuff. So we need him back on the show. And I think he said after he is over at Super Bowl hangover, I guess he was really excited about the Super Bowl this year for some reason.
Yeah. And we've gotten your emails, Wes Dallas. We do know that he is the most popular host that we've got. So we will work on getting him back when he is off of dog duty or off of his postal route or whatever else he's up to. He does get busy drinking beer sometimes. We tried to change the rules of the show so that he could actually enjoy a frosty beverage during taping, which is, obviously not been allowed in the previous 15 years of this podcast. So, or of this show. But anyways, we will hope to return soon. And speaking of that, continue to send us your emails. Brew Crew Review Podcast with an S at gmail.com is our email address. Please give us a follow on Twitter at Brew Crew Review 1. We will respond to you on Twitter the quickest, but we will always answer your questions via email as well. So look forward to hearing from you.
All right, that sounds good, Vince. Let's have a great rest of the off season and looking forward to spring training. So
sounds great, Craig.
Waiting for
sounds
spring.
Great. Let's hope that we're talking about another move soon.
Absolutely. All right, well, stay classy, West Dallas, and go Brewers.
Go Brewers. Do.